All right, good Tuesday afternoon. Happy 2022. Welcome to NCSA Live. I'm David Kamisic, Senior Recruiting Manager here at Next College Student Athlete. Appreciate you guys hopping back on. We had a few weeks off with the holidays, so hope everyone enjoyed themselves and hope more importantly stayed safe and healthy. As we do every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central, we've been doing this for several years. We'll continue it this year as well. We're going to educate you all on the recruiting process, start with a specific topic and dive into some details, but then certainly encourage you guys to drop any questions you have, whether you're watching us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever social platform you're watching us on. Encourage your questions, whether it be about the topic we're going to talk about or whether it just be anything pressing your minds when it comes to the recruiting process. We want to get to as many as we can here and have some good interaction over the next half hour or so. This week's topic is going to focus on recruiting calendars. Obviously, a lot of calendar talk with it being the new year, but really want to make sure that families and you guys all understand what are the NCAA rules, the calendar, understanding each recruiting period. We'll dive specifically into that and then get into the details about when college coaches can contact student athletes, which, again, a lot of different variables there depending on the sport and the division level. Joining me today is our recruiting manager, Philip Wells, one of our NCSA Live staples. Philip, Happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year, David. I'm doing amazing. I'm happy to be back in action here after this short break.
Shaking off a little rust from NCSA Live. We had a couple of weeks off, so we're jumping right back in it as well. But today's topic, Philip, is the NCAA recruiting rules, the NCAA recruiting calendar. The NCAA is the governing body of college athletics, and they have rules in place based around recruiting, based on sports, grad years. Again, a lot of different topics that we'll be covering here. But Philip, first and foremost, let's talk about the NCAA recruiting rules. Why are they in place? What's the purpose of them? And really, what's the impact that this has on families?
Yeah, absolutely. So to start, the NCAA recruiting rules are really in place. There are rules in place to mandate the types of communication that athletes can receive from college coaches, and really is depicted amongst the athlete's high school year. Okay, whether it's freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, really these recruiting rules are in place to, again, mandate when a college coach can start reaching out amongst, again, the actual time period. Now, alongside the actual recruiting rules, we do have, again, as David mentioned, the recruiting calendars. And again, you work along with them side by side. The recruiting calendars, while the rules actually mandate when you can be communicated with, or when a college coach can communicate with you based on grad year, the actual calendars depict when a college coach can communicate with you or cannot communicate with you throughout the year. Okay, different seasons, different time periods. We're, of course, starting the new year here in January. We'll talk about some of the things to really expect depending on your grad year. What does this mean for families? Okay, what does this mean for student athletes? This means that if you're embarking into the recruiting journey, into the recruiting process, you need to know what the recruiting rules are. You need to know what the recruiting calendars are. That way you can always be proactive and ahead of the game when it comes to how you should reach out to a college coach, when coaches should be reaching out to you, and really how to properly manage the recruiting process. And as we really explore the recruiting calendars, they're broken up into time periods. Okay, they're broken up into 4 different time periods, and they all include the dead period, quiet period, the evaluation period, and lastly, the contact period. And again, these are in place typically to really govern the types of communication that college coaches can reach out to student athletes with, and when exactly college coaches can reach out with that communication.
Yeah, let's start with the dead period. So this is really the most restrictive of all the recruiting periods when it comes to what coaches are allowed to or not allowed to do. In the dead period, coaches are not allowed to talk to recruits at their college campus, at the athlete's school, at a camp, even at the grocery store, anywhere pretty much. The dead period is what it would suggest, a dead time when it comes to recruiting, but with the college coaches and the student athletes having contact. So coaches can still, look at film, they can still evaluate athletes, but they are not allowed to have any sort of contact or, communication with a student athlete at a campus, at school, really any in-person communication. And the dead period does make it seem like all recruiting stops, but that's not the case. Athletes and coaches are still allowed to communicate via phone, email, social media, text messages, any sort of digital communication. So the dead period really just prohibits any in-person communication. But again, any communication over the phone, digitally, Zoom, whatever the case is, that communication period is still live. So dead period is an important one. Again, this is important for families to know, because if you're at an event and it's a dead period and you're trying to have a communication or talk to a college coach, and that coach maybe seems like they're giving you the shoulder and ignoring you, it's because at points the college coach literally cannot communicate with you. Otherwise, that is an NCAA violation. And that's why a lot of these rules, these timelines, these calendars are put into place, is to have a restriction and to have rules around what the NCAA puts in place for recruiting. So it's important to know that. So again, if it's a dead period, you cannot communicate face-to-face with a college coach in an event anywhere. But again, the communication can be done digitally, phone, email, social media, all that sort of stuff as well. Quiet period, Philip, is a little bit kind of similar to the dead period. It does open things up a little bit. Why don't you touch a little bit on the quiet period?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things in a quiet period that we see as far as the difference goes is really the in-person side of things. In the quiet period, recruits are able to actually communicate with college coaches in person on the college campus. Okay, you have to be on that college campus and you can communicate in person with the college coach. Now, within this period, you cannot communicate in person with this coach at practice, at a game. You can't invite coach out to a tournament. This is a period where the in-person back and forth has to happen on that college campus. Okay, and this does typically apply to our higher level recruits. Okay, it's designed for our higher level recruits. Although, again, it's in place for everyone. Our higher level recruits typically see a lot of those visits, a lot of those house visits, a lot of coaches coming out to your high school, a lot of coaches coming out to your practice. To some degree, for our higher level athletes, they need a break. Okay, they need a break. And that's why this period is outlined, although it's for every recruit out there. Okay, it's a period throughout the year where, again, you can meet with that coach and speak with that coach on that college campus. But if you see during the actual quiet period that coach is at your high school, that coach is visiting you off their college campus, that is against NCAA policy, as NCAA violation. And this is why it's, again, really important that as a recruit, as a family, just so you can keep college coaches accountable as they will for you.
Cool. So we got the dead period, the quiet period. We're gonna quiz everyone on this afterwards, so making sure you're paying attention. And then the evaluation period. So this is a specific time of year when college coaches are allowed to watch an athlete compete in person, visit their school. However, they're not allowed to communicate with that athlete, with the parents of an athlete off of the college campus. So coaches can go to an event, they can sit in the stands at a game or a practice, they can visit the school, but again, they're not allowed to communicate with that athlete in those settings. If it's on campus, that changes things a little bit. So again, the evaluation period really gives college coaches a chance to talk to recruits, the coaches or teachers or anyone in a club or travel organization, to really get a better understanding of who that student athlete is. And then after the visit, the coach may call that recruit. They can email them. They can let them know, how their takeaways were in terms of the communication over the phone or email or text message, whatever the case is. So again, coaches can go out and evaluate the athletes, but they cannot talk with the athlete at the place that they are evaluating them. So again, that's an evaluation period. The last period, Philip, is the contact period. And this is, I would say, the most open, the most common one. The quiet periods, the dead periods, the evaluation periods are typically kind of shorter spurts throughout the year. Contact period is usually where most of the year lies. So why don't you talk a little bit more about the contact period?
Absolutely. It's typically what we're waiting for. Okay. Contact period is really that period where, it's all hands on deck. All forms of communication is typically fair game throughout this period. Okay. And this is another reason why it's really important to pay attention to the recruiting rules in comparison with the recruiting calendars. Because during the contact period, all communication is fair game. But if you're an underclassman and not yet able to receive communication from a college coach, there's a little bit of a caveat there. So really important that we're looking at both sides of it, both recruiting calendars and rules. When it comes to that contact period, again, whether it be digitally, all forms of communication, whether it be text messages, phone calls, emails, all forms of the digital communication is very much fair game. But the big thing about the contact period, in which we don't really see in a lot of the other periods, it's also fair game with in-person communication. Whether as an athlete, you're visiting that coach at home at their campus, or whether that college coach is coming out to actually visit you at home, visit you at your high school, at your practice, at your game. They're able to actually visit you and communicate with you, which is the really differentiating factor when we compare it to the other three recruiting periods in terms of calendars. So this is really, I wouldn't say the granddaddy of all periods, but it is the period where a lot of recruits wait for it, because it's all hands on deck from a college coach, and it's all hands on deck from a student athlete as well.
Yeah, and our website, ncsasports.org, has a lot more detail around the periods, when they are. Again, each sport's a little bit different in terms of when those occur. It's important to note as well, again, this is for NCAA. So the NCAA put these rules, put this calendar in place. So it doesn't apply to Division III schools, NAIA schools, or junior colleges. Those schools technically are not under the NCAA umbrella. So really Division I and Division II schools are who this is going to impact the most. And now let's kind of transition into when coaches can contact you. Very similarly, for Division III, NAIA, and junior colleges, there is no restriction as to when one of those coaches can have contact with a student athlete. That's different than Division I and Division II schools, where there are certain dates in place, again, based on the sport, as to when a coach can contact a student athlete. So as a freshman in high school, if I was to get a call from a Division III coach, we could have a conversation. We could talk on the phone. There's no restrictions. There's no rules against that. Conversely, as a student athlete, I can pick up the phone. I can call a Division III coach. We can have a full conversation as well. It is important for Division I and Division II schools as well, for student athletes that are reaching out to those coaches, to know there is no restriction as to when a student athlete can reach out to a college coach. So as a freshman in high school, I can email a Division I coach, try to get myself on their radar, get them some information, some video, whatever the case is. But there are restrictions in terms of how and when that coach can communicate back with me. So Philip, let's touch a little bit more on that. In terms of Division I, Division II schools, let's dive into some of the specific dates in terms of when that can happen. For the most case, you're looking typically that summer after your sophomore year, heading into junior year is when the floodgates really open.
Yeah, really, when it comes down to it, and please go to our website, go to ncsasports.org to look at specifics amongst your sport. But for the majority, again, after sophomore year, June 15th is really going to be that period where a lot of the floodgates start to open. And if you're not looking at that date, you're going to be looking at September 1st of your junior year for the majority of sports out there. And again, that doesn't include every sport. There is a few that have different guidelines and different dates. So again, go to our website in that regard, and you're able to find your specific sport, your specific grad year, and you're able to follow along in the recruiting process, so you can be proactive instead of reactive when it comes to this process, because we know there's a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot of different rules. And really, when it comes down to it, we look at the number of rules we have. Recruiting calendars, for example, we didn't always have them. Okay. A couple years ago, maybe a few years back, they didn't exist. So when it comes down to it, the NCAA, they saw a need for it. Okay. And there's always going to be needs in the recruiting process that are there now that come up. So one thing the NCAA does annually is host different conventions where they invite coaches out at the college level. They invite, administrators out. In fact, we're in that season right now. Okay. Typically in January every year, there's a big convention where coaches come out and they vote on a wide range of different proposals and new rules to impact the recruiting process in a positive direction. So again, ultimately, these are rules that are in place now amongst the calendars, but they could be subject to change. So within that, always be sure, again, follow the NCSA website, follow us on social media, because there are subject to change when it comes to rules. And we always want to make sure you're at the top of your game with knowing what the rules are at the current time.
Yeah, especially we saw this a ton during COVID, right? At the beginning of COVID, the NCAA changed a lot of rules in terms of the contact and student athletes not being able to go to campuses and coaches not being able to go out and visit kids, again, Division I, Division II schools primarily. So that was a little bit of a different sort of experience, kind of a once in a hopefully a lifetime thing. Hopefully that it doesn't get back to that way. But again, the important date really to focus on, I think, is June 15th after your sophomore year for the majority of sports. For Division II across every sport, that's when the floodgates open. For the majority of Division I schools as well, June 15th is when that starts. A couple schools or a couple sports, excuse me, are a little bit earlier. Men's hockey is the earliest of all recruiting periods, January 1st between of your sophomore year is when Division I coaches can start that contact. And then for some sports, it's going to be a little bit later, September 1st of your junior year. So again, this is really important because, again, if you're waiting for a coach to contact you, you need to know when that coach can contact you. If you're waiting for a coach to contact you and these dates hit and the coaches haven't contacted you, probably is a good sign that they're not maybe as serious about you as a potential recruit, because when these dates hit, these coaches, they don't begin their recruiting process when these days start. They're evaluating athletes in some cases, 8th grade, freshman year, sophomore year. They're kind of narrowing down that list. And then when this date hits, if I'm a college coach at a Division I or Division II level, I'm picking up the phone. I'm calling my top recruits. I'm calling, okay, of the kids that I've evaluated, the hundreds and hundreds of kids I've spent the last 2 years looking at, let's focus now on this class. Let me start making some phone calls, building that communication, building that relationship. And again, that's for coaches reaching out to student athletes. It's important to note that student athletes, you guys can reach out to a college coach at any point. Now, again, depending on the sport, that coach may not be able to talk to you right away. They may not be able to email you personally, but you're doing yourself a justice by getting yourself on that coach's radar versus just waiting and hoping the coaches find you. And again, there's thousands of kids out there. So again, we have a lot more information on our website, ncsasports.org. Breaks down the sports, breaks down the specifics with the division levels. Again, follow us on social media. We're constantly posting kind of this week, where's this week in the recruiting process. So Tommy Myers and our social media team does a great job of keeping that information updated for families there as well. But Philip, I think, again, it's important to note these are really in places for college coaches. This is what the college coaches' limitations are. But for student athletes, don't wait until June 15th of your sophomore, junior year. Don't wait for September 1st of your junior year to get this process started. If you know you want to be a college athlete, the earlier you can start getting your online profile, starting to get your information out there a little bit, that's where you're going to put yourself in the best position. So again, when these dates hit, that coach is hopefully calling you. The worst thing that can happen is these dates hit, it's silent. There's no phone calls, no text messages, no emails, none of that personal contact coming in.
Absolutely. The old adage there is, you want to stay ahead of the game. You want to be proactive. You want to do as much research as possible. That way, when those dates hit, David, you're not, actually behind an 8 ball a little bit. And the old adage is, hey, when those dates hit, college coaches aren't pulling names out of an address book. They're not pulling names out of a magic hat. At that point, they know who already they're looking to contact. And typically, that's who've actually been proactive and really ahead of the game.
Good stuff. Cool. All right, we got a few questions coming in here, so let's get to a couple here. Let's start with Angie. Angie's daughter is a 2023 volleyball player, so currently a junior in high school. After 217 at a volleyball tournament, is she allowed to go up to a coach that she has already been talking to and say hi, or do you wait for the coach to make the first move? Philip, I'll turn this one over to you.
Yeah, so anytime you can actually gain or see that a coach is at that volleyball meet or tournament or really in attendance, and you've already had some communication with that coach, absolutely. Now, if it's actual time period where, it's a little bit restrictive, we know that we can always follow up with that coach. And maybe it's even just a time period where that coach is busy or swarming, or maybe you're swarming in competition. Feel free to always communicate when that coach leaves. Send out a follow-up email, send out a follow-up social media message, shoot out a call, tell a coach, thank you for attending. What did you think? Always look to pick that coach's brain, but absolutely you want to follow up.
Yeah, and volleyball is a sport that's a little bit different. There's not a whole lot of dead, quiet periods, all that sort of stuff. The only really dead period last year for women's volleyball was November 8th to the 11th. So it's only a 4-day period there. So again, women's volleyball sports is a sport that you can be very, very communicative with. The volleyball recruiting process does start extremely early. So again, it's a contact period, so they can talk to them. Again, for the juniors, any 2023 prospect right now, it's really fair game across the board for all sports. Seniors certainly is the case as well. Another question here, Philip. We'll turn this over to you. We got one from Chieko. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. If not, I apologize. And you were tardy, so you apologize as well. So we're apologizing to each other. Great. But 2022 daughter is already committed, Philip, to a Division III school. What should they expect at this point for seniors that have made that commitment? You've kind of put that victory cap on, so to speak. And at this point, it's really just a matter of making sure everything with the school's in place and you're good to go and ready to start your school year in, gosh, 8-9 months.
First, congratulations. Big accomplishment, big time. And this is a time period where you just want to make sure, all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. You want to make sure the communication with the coach is strong. You want to make sure the communication with the administrative department is strong. Because again, we know they typically operate on two different entities, although the college coach is going to help you out a ton. So again, just make sure everything is crossed off the list when it comes to your enrollment, making sure all transcripts, all that kind of stuff is accepted, which it should be. And then obviously you want to ask the college coach what to expect from an athletic standpoint, from the practice schedules, the balancing between, school and practice, school and competition. You want to really get an idea of what the day in the life is going to be like now that you are committed, now that you are admitted, and now that you are getting ready to embark on a new journey.
Yeah, if you're uncertain what to do, if you're a senior, whether it's Division I, II, III, NAIA, JUCO, you've made that commitment. Talk to the coach, talk to the admissions office, make sure everything's good. Again, if you've gotten to that point that you've committed to that school, the coaches should be able to provide some guidance there in terms of what to do. I'm just going to go with Nada because I'm going to butcher this name, but we got a question from Nadaweja. That doesn't sound right at all. Nada, I'm not even going to guess. We'll go with Nat. How about Nats? What can we do as far as having college coaches wanting to follow sons of freshman baseball player? For this one, again, Nat, you want your student athlete, number one, build an online profile. If you don't have an online profile, that's critical these days in the recruiting process, especially with so much of recruiting starting online. Get an NCSA profile built, start getting that information on there for coaches, so that coaches that are in our network that are already starting to identify 2025 recruits, they're able to start to maybe keep track of your student athlete. If you could put together some video, a skills video in baseball specifically, coaches still will want to be able to evaluate a student athlete at a young age to see their progress over the next few years. That's the important piece. If your student athlete has started already thinking about what type of school they may want to go to, or as a size of a school or a location, you can, as a freshman, again, reach out to a college coach just to get your profile sent out to them. Just to have that coach, again, know who your student athlete is. If you can get your student athlete's name on a prospect list, maybe that, eventually turns into a camp invite where the student athlete goes to the camp to perform in front of the coaches. Maybe the coach comes out and watches the student athlete play. They can still do that even though they can't talk to them. So again, the more proactive you can be, important early on. But again, get a profile built, have that online presence. That's going to give you exposure to potentially every college coach in the country. So great question there for sure. We got another one here from Kaylee. Kaylee is a golfer. She's a sophomore in high school from a small school, which we hear a lot from Philip, for families that are looking to get exposure. So what's the best advice here that you have for Kaylee with her being a sophomore, coming from a little bit of a smaller school?
Absolutely. You absolutely want to build a recruiting page. You want to build a recruiting profile. And when it comes to a little bit of a smaller school, maybe in a smaller area, maybe not known for the hotbed for college coaches, it doesn't matter. 90% of recruiting is done online. Make sure you're online. Make sure you have an online profile where you can showcase your talent. You can showcase what you've done in the classroom. And again, from there, college coaches will still be able to fully evaluate you without ever stepping foot in your small town or in your small high school.
Yeah, for student athletes from a smaller school, from a rural area where coaches aren't flocking to come see them, or a state that's not highly recruited, it's that much more important to have that online presence, to have a way for coaches to be able to see you. Again, I'm assuming coaches aren't just randomly showing up to your high school or your golf meets or whatever the case is. So again, having that online presence is certainly really important. Also, it was pronounced Natoya, so I was way wrong. So Natoya, I apologize for that, but certainly going to be awesome. Cool. So we got one more question here that we'll take from another Nat. These names are throwing me for a loop today, Philip. I gotta figure this out here. But what's the best way to contact coaches if I'm not from the USA? How do they make how to make them notice me? I play soccer. Probably similar answer to the last two that we've had, but for international student athletes, very much like rural, student athletes in the U.S., it's difficult to get that exposure. Starting online is important.
Absolutely. I think, it's even that much more imperative because a college coach couldn't visit you in most cases if they wanted to. So in that regard, having an online presence and really just doing all you can to make communication with that coach, again, via social media platforms, digitally, all platforms, and obviously using your online presence, using your recruiting profile to engage with that coach and keep that coach up to speed of what you've been doing and what you've been accomplishing.
Yeah, it's unlikely a college coach is going to hop the pond and go to Europe or Asia or wherever to a different place, hoping to just discover somebody. So again, having an online profile is really critical. Just also, I think making sure the academics are in line, and then the grading systems in other countries are different than the U.S. So making sure you're checking all your boxes there with the NCAA eligibility center, little things like that can certainly be important as well. But again, I know we went over a lot of different, but maybe similar sounding things with the dead period, the quiet period, contact period, evaluation period. Again, our website, ncsasports.org, has a ton of great information, breaks down the specifics of each sport, the division levels. We could spend probably hours going through each one, but we want to save some time here and encourage you guys to check that out. And again, follow us on social media. Any potential changes that come or any just time periods with where we're at in recruiting, we're going to have all that information available for you. But again, just know that for these Division I and Division II coaches, they have restrictions, they have limitations in how and when they can contact student athletes. But that doesn't mean that a student athlete should wait for those periods to start the recruiting process. The earlier you can start, certainly the better off you're going to be. So cool. We're heading to Philip's favorite part of every Facebook Live, and that is ringing our bell, which we have here in the Chicago office to acknowledge some of our commitments. So Philip, let's start with you.
Absolutely. So again, coming up, we got Connor Hayes. Actually, David, I think that was yours. Connor Hayes over at University of Louisville.
So yeah, Connor is a track and cross country athlete. He's making the commitment to the University of Louisville. Obviously an ACC program, so a big one there for Connor, getting to go to a Division I program, and he'll be competing there at that next level.
Very good. And then Dylan there with the setting of All-Star. Okay, shout out to Dylan there going or committed to Quincy University, actually here in Illinois. Dylan, heck of a posture there from what it sounds or from what it looks like. But ultimately, Dylan signed up with NCSA last year, right in the middle of a pandemic, obviously accomplished his goal. And again, some stats to really just follow Dylan. Over 1,000 searches from college coaches, almost 200 views from coaches, and close to 60 follows from coaches. But overall, just super excited for Dylan with a huge commitment to Quincy. Go Hawks.
Dylan Feely, congratulations. And last up, we have Finley Payne, bringing the pain on that line drive there at the plate, but obviously a major accomplishment for Finley, taking her softball and I would assume very high academic qualifications as well to Harvard University, obviously an Ivy League program, one of the top academic schools in the country there. So Finley getting the opportunity to continue her college career at Harvard University. So again, just a few of the commitments that we've recently had come through. Again, part of what NCSA is all about is helping families navigate through this process and celebrating the success and the work that student athletes and their families put in to put themselves in a position to get that opportunity. So awesome to see those commitments there for sure. So Philip, always a pleasure. Great way to start 22 in my book by having you here on Facebook Live. And we'll be doing a bunch of these throughout the rest of the year. So again, every Tuesday, 2 p.m. Central Time, it'll be Philip and myself, or Kyle Winters and Christina Sipney Cicero. The four of us will be rotating here throughout the year to, again, hopefully educate, bring some good information to the recruiting process, and answer any questions that you guys have. And as always, if you have any additional questions that we didn't get to or anything really specific to your student athlete or where you're at as a student athlete, reach out to us, let us know. We're more than happy to pick up the phone, give you a buzz, and make sure that you guys are in the good spot here. But Philip, always a pleasure. Have a great rest of your week here, and hope everyone does at home as well. Take care.
See you, everyone.